Hello and thank you for tuning in to our first Creepypasta DDS podcast. I'm your host Jaino coming to you straight from Tokyo Millennium, circa 20XDX. For our first story, I'd like to go and read something pretty original, I would like to think. It's called Through Darkness I Fall by Nicholas Nelson. Let's begin now. I had to escape. No place was safe anymore. My home was the first to become unsafe. I was in bed when I saw it. The dark figure posed at my window. Shadow formed over my wall. I hadn't moved then. I just kept my eyes on the shadow until it receded into the night. I'd kept staring at that spot, awaiting its return, but it never came back. Then it appeared at my work. From the old water pipes started a whisper. Whenever the pressure increased, the voice would murmur, and now, finally, its warnings are over, and it's coming. I don't know how all of this came together, but it has, and here and now I'm trying to outrun my tormentor. The forest was ancient, planted before our ancestors came to this land. Each tree was a titanic horror looming at me, and every root was a gnarled hand reaching for my feet. The moon beamed down between the trees. My legs were aching, my lungs were charred with exhaustion. I wanted to stop, and I almost did, but another fleeting shadow out of the corner of my eye brought me back to a full sprint. The forest broke out into a thin clearing. Old brick buildings from a forgotten town stood erect, time slowly bringing about their destruction. I jetted to the nearest building. Its brick walls were covered with old red creepers and lichen. The stone porch leading up was uneven and loose with age, and I nearly slipped at the top before clawing at the door's handle. Swinging the heavy thing open, I leaped inside. The wood was peeling and the plaster chipped. Low-hanging ceilings and doorways suggested frugality over comfort. The unstained wooden floor creaked as I rushed from empty room to empty room, seeking a refuge from the windows and other portals threatening to let those outside in. I slammed into a wall, shaking off more paint before collapsing into a corner. Each piece of my being was vibrating with the horror my stalker carried. My heavy breathing was all to be heard in the old house, laying in this apocalyptic village. There was no rustle of leaves or heave of wind, only the intrusion of my own breath. I was beginning to calm down, thinking it was finally safe to venture out and find my way home, when I picked up the almost silent noise. My eyes locked onto the adjacent window, its curtainless face blurred with dirt and grime. Slowly the sound grew, the noise of footsteps on an autumn lawn, the disquiet of leaves being brushed aside by swaying feet. I swallowed and nearly choked as the shadow passed by. My eyes formed into saucers, and my heart slammed in my chest as the ragged form slowly shuffled by. I listened for another soul-shattering minute before I heard the door rattle in its frame, that tiny noise of wood tapping on wood. I felt my body freeze with horror, my hands gripping the floorboard gaps, hoping they would anchor my courage and not my fear. From the other side of the house, I could hear the wooden floor creak and bend, and I braced, silently storing energy. The creak grew and weaved around each room until it was adjacent to my own, and I could sense it, standing near the doorless frame, waiting for me to beckon it in and perform its dark persecutions. When my anxiety reached its peak, I acted. Springing up, I took 3 swift steps, paused to gather momentum, and crashed through the window, its hard wooden beams smashing against my face and forearms. I could feel its dual glass panes cleave into me. I hit the patio stone flooring before bolting off to the next building. The structure arose like a great oak in a forest surrounding it. The ivy and moss clung to it like a babe to its mother. It was 3 stories, the stone trimming carved into leering faces and designs. I also ascended into this one's patio stairs and gripped its handle. Pulling with all my might, I couldn't twist or budge the thing. With the frothing of a cornered animal, I kicked its timber door, smashing the rusted lock and charging in. Several rows of pews were meticulously laid on the floor, facing a pedestal and stand. The windows were the same as the building before, tarnished with dust. Behind the stand was a great tapestry, depicting a cross embedded with a swastika on a 6-pointed star background. The rotting wood and mold permeated the room as I headed for the dais. Gripping the stand, I wheeled around, looking for another exit or place to hide, but I found none. Slamming the podium to the ground, I lunged at the religious tapestry, pulling it to the side, only to see a stone wall. I choked with defeat and stumbled across the stage. Primal fear, the only emotion in me. I gripped the walls, tears stroking my face. I was so sure this was the end. And how fitting. My death from a monster in this church. Tipping away from the wall, I staggered to the other side, and my foot slipped into the floor, and I fell with a yelp. Wrenching my foot free, I saw a trap door. An unlocked metal padlock was struck between the door's latch and floor. Desperation flowed past the fear as I pulled the lock loose and slid the trapdoor up. Dark, damp air wafted up at me, mixing with my sweat. I ignored the knot in my gut and slid down. In the reassuring darkness, I pulled the door back over, wove the padlock through its latch, and snapped it shut. Relief flooded through me. Now it can't follow me here. Now I can escape and be free. Slowly my hands explored the darkness. I was standing on an iron-rung ladder. I began the descent deeper into the earth, with the only sound being dripping water and my shoes clacking against the metal crossbars. My foot slipped against nothing, and all my weight was thrown onto one rung. A piece of it snapped from the wall and bent away, but I did not fall. Gripping the next bar, I gently prodded the space where the step should have been. Dipping down farther, my foot tapped against the next step, and cautiously, I sunk down and felt where the missing rung should have been. Iron nubs poked out of the cement. An ancient village, indeed. Before long, my foot plunged into the water, and I felt its depth. At my knee, I felt a solid ground and sank into the sewer. Once again, I explored the area with my hands. Several small holes and gaps led into this room, but a low concrete dome was my only exit. I bent forward on my knees and delved deeper into the dark underground labyrinth. With the silence and heavy gloom, I was afraid and yet unfearful of this place. The low-hanging tunnels and the stink of sewage was welcoming compared to the horrible creature looking above me. I struggled through the tiny tunnels, hoping to reach another opening and finally escape. Ahead, a silver flicker of moonlight caught my eye. Breaking free from the claustrophobic underpass, I saw another door, above with the same bent iron ladder rungs. Gripping the handles, I could smell the freedom. Reaching up, I gently pushed, but the door resisted. I pushed harder, but was still with no avail. So I shoved my entire body up against the door. Alas, it must be locked from above. But then a noise captured my attention. It sounded like something was above the trapdoor. Like something leaning over, breathing, and listening. Well, hey there, dear listener. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this story. Nothing gives me more pleasure than reading out some creepy little stories, especially when you consider how can something so sound-based create so much tension. How can something that you read or you listen to cause so much horror within the human body? Now, we can go ahead and thank my friend from the television for this one. He crawled out early one midnight, handed me a slew of paperwork, and he said, "Keep it safe." Wouldn't you know it, I couldn't keep my eyes off of it. He warned me that it would unlock my true potential, rip some sort of persona from my body, but so far I seem to have all my limbs and all my soul intact. If Loki can't steal it, who can? So, my dear viewer, I want to go and thank you very much. And if you have anything else you'd like, please shoot me an email at DDSBoard@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at Jaino. Until then, may this night and every night grant you light, and this night and every night grant you peace, and this night and every night grant you rest, and this night and every night grant you grace, and this night and every night grant you joy. Thank you for listening to the DDSBoard podcast. This podcast is free and doesn't make any money and isn't sponsored by anyone. All music is used under fair use. The opinions voiced in this podcast do not represent anyone but the speaker, aka me or a guest, and shouldn't be taken out of context or misinterpreted. This podcast is under the Creative Commons license. Contact me with questions or comments at ddsboard@gmail.com.